Welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove, and I'm joined by a man who was right. US Soccer did it. They released the roster while we were recording our weekend review.
Yep.
His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. We knew it would happen. It always does.
We did. I will say, I feel a little better this time because we got the heads up. It's coming out on Monday. It's coming out, 10 days ahead of the first game. This actually feels a little better to me.
Why? Because you have a little bit more notice?
Yeah, just like admin-wise, I feel like this roster is out ahead of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That works. They're ahead of schedule.
I just think like we are mean to US Soccer a lot about their roster timings. At least this one is plenty of days ahead of the game, and we were given fair warning.
All right.
Yeah? I'm setting a low bar, but they're meeting.
You really are. You're starting off with
but they're vaulting over
we've
it.
turned in our assignment ahead of schedule. All right.
And
Yeah.
here's my thing. I think I quite like this roster.
Okay.
For the most part. For the most part. Maybe we'll talk about exclusions in a second, but maybe overview first. I think this is... it's Dave Saracen still in charge, obviously, but apart from that, this is the roster. As in, there's some young kids on there who you can now say are part of the best 23 we can select, or 24 in this case. And they've called in some of the more senior players, like Michael Bradley is back. So there's no one left excluded, right? There's no one who's like, oh, we'll get him back later.
Yeah, I mean, I take your point. I would say there's a few on there that I wouldn't say are like automatic. Like, yeah, they're definitely senior team players.
Yes.
But for the most part, I'm with you.
With some experimentation at the fringes, which is really what makes this roster kind of interesting.
Yeah,
right?
I think so. Yeah, I mean... interesting or confusing, depending on which player we're talking about and where. But yeah, I think I'm with you that for the most part, this seems like our strongest possible roster. I mean, you look at, say, goalkeeper, for example. It's the first time we've had Brad Guzan back. I know we're going to get more into specific names and positions later on, but basically I'm just using that as an example of Guzan, Horvath, Stefan. That's pretty much the top three.
It's the balance, right?
Yeah.
It's the balance of the experience and the up-and-comers.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll be interested...
And Ethan Horvath.
He's still an up-and-comer. He's just stalled.
Yeah.
His car has just stalled going up the hill, but he'll probably get it restarted.
All right.
Yeah.
That's a lot of probablys, and also he's still a car. That's not great. Or a stalled car, that is.
Do a hill start. It'll be fine. In Belgium as well. It's pretty flat. Okay, so let's talk about exclusions first, because there are interesting names on there, but there are interesting names left off. The first name that people will notice has been left off, because Michael Bradley's there, there's no Jose Altidore. It's not as big of a deal as you think.
It's not.
Right?
Right.
The opposite to how Toronto announced Jermaine Defoe's arrival.
Yes.
It's not a bloody big deal.
It is not. Instead, it's basically just injury, right? He subbed off very early in the first half of their 4-1 win over New England. So maybe would have been in consideration. We assume probably would have been on the roster. Maybe it would have been a 25-player roster instead of 24. But he will not
or
be
Novakovic was staying home. We
or
don't
that.
know yet.
Yeah.
But it's an ankle injury. That's why there's no Jose Altidore. So it's not that big of a deal. Who is a big deal that they're missing?
I mean, to some extent, I want to go back to, I think you were right. Like, there's nobody that's a huge deal in my mind because this is more or less like a first team. I think, as you said, the final few names on the roster, maybe that's where you could have had a bit of change.
Can I frame it as strongest starting 11 and then some experimentation like the last 4 or 5 names on the roster?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, so you could make an argument that, say, Tim Ream, who has just returned to playing for Fulham, was so important for Fulham last season. Maybe he should have gotten a look at center back. That's, again, it's like a maybe based on returning to form, but maybe you want to give him time to get healthy.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, the other name that stands out to me is Darlington Nagbe.
Yeah,
I thought maybe Bradley's coming back, senior midfielder's coming back. Darlington Nagbe would be coming back. It can't be just because the Red Bulls ran over Atlanta's midfield. Right?
No, I don't think so.
From what I've seen, Nagbe's actually played really well the last 2-3 weeks for Atlanta United. So I'm surprised that he's not on this roster, especially given there's a lot of midfielders on this roster.
Well, see, I think that's why he's not, if I'm being totally honest. Is I feel like if you look at this, it seemed like we were trying to figure out maybe what they're going to play and who's going to play where off air. And like, I don't think Darlington Nagbe would have been in that conversation with a lot of the names that we were saying.
Okay.
Some of that informed by what Dave Saracen has already done. Some of that informed by who we think will play and where.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm with you that Darlington Nagbe could have been on here and have been like, oh great, Darlington Nagbe's there. But that he wasn't necessarily a surprise to me.
And then, this gets the interesting part to me.
Yeah.
No Eric Lehigh, who is sort of the left back. He's up there with the left backs. No Shaq Moore. And we've got experimentation.
Is he definitely a left back?
Who?
Eric Lehigh?
He's both. I think he can play
gotcha.
either side. We've got no Eric Lehigh. We've got no Shaq Moore. Instead, we've got, I'm going to say second choice fullbacks are Reggie Cannon of FC Dallas and Ben Sweat of New York City FC. I would say Yedlin and Anthony Robinson are the clear 2 first choises.
Yeah. So I guess Dave Sarachan just knew he wouldn't be there for the January camp, so wanted to get 2 January players in for this camp. Is that basically how that was?
It could be that.
Yeah.
It could be that. Maybe we'll come back around to those 2 players later. I want
Sure.
to get some more overview type things in here. The names people will be excited about.
Well, there's only one more name that's missing that maybe could have been in there that was in there last time. It's Gyasi Zardes. That's the only other one that we haven't said yet.
I completely forgot.
Yeah, I mean,
Gyasi
and he looked fine when he was there, but I think maybe it's that he wants to be kind to Columbus and give them, a striker still hanging around so that they don't have to deal with that. Or it might just be that he only wanted to call in, say, 4 forwards, one of whom was going to be Josie Altidore. When Josie Altidore drops out, you still have 24 players on roster, so maybe you don't need one more. Yeah.
Especially if we're probably going to play with 1 forward.
Yeah.
Because I look at this roster and I see Christian Pulisic, I see Kenny Saif, I see Jonathan Amon, I see Tim Weah. I see a lot of potential wingers.
Yep.
I think we're going to have some attacking thrust out wide in either a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3. What's the difference, really?
Yeah.
I mean, there is a difference. But I think we're going to have some attacking width. That's the thing that's got me excited about this roster.
It does feel like if you sort of were to come up, which I think we will, if we were going to try to come up with what we think the approach might be for these games, it does feel like, given the players you've got here, it's going to be a lot of attack down the channels, because I would say all 4 potential fullbacks are very good attacking, if not as strong defensively sometimes. So it feels like you've got attacking fullbacks in there, and then you've got the attacking wingers or wide players that you've mentioned. So it does feel like defensive through the middle, attack out wide.
Yep. All right. Which names jump off the page then, if we're going to sort of talk about some of the players on this roster? What's the first name that caught your eye? Let's put it that way.
The first name that caught my eye is probably Christian Pulisic. Just that he's back. There won't be any more stories about, does he really want to play for the USA? Is he tired of the USA? What does it mean to him?
Depends how busy of his glassip is,
I suppose. I was happy to see Christian Pulisic back in. It does feel like, as you said, we want to see like the strongest possible team that isn't playing Bolivia. I think that's the only time, I believe I'm correct in saying that's the only time we've seen him and Weston McKennie together for the national team.
McKennie,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I feel like it would be nice to see them against stronger opposition in Colombia and Peru.
And talking about Pulisic for a second, if you heard our review show, I'm not sure our weekend review show, he was subbed out for Dortmund, but he actually played fine. Yeah. I think maybe it just wasn't tactically a good setup against Leverkusen.
Agreed.
He had some dribbling at people, got fouled, a couple of crosses that didn't go where they wanted to go. But recently he's had a goal, he's had an assist. He is in fine form. We're getting good Christian Pulisic, is what I'm saying.
I would say this, and I feel like we've had this conversation, but I would say we've reached that point with Pulisic where I'm not worried. Like, if he comes
about
off
him losing his spot or whatever?
Yeah, if he comes out in the 60th minute or the 50th minute, it's just okay, it was a bad game. I think, but he's still going to be in there. He's going to be one of their senior players. He's a veteran for that squad.
Yep.
I mean, you could see it when he came out. He didn't have that look of fury that he had been subbed out, and he didn't have that look of oh no, I've made a horrible mistake. It was just sort of frustration that they couldn't do better.
Yep, it was high five Lucien Favre, high five some guys on the bench, then sit back and hope that the team does well.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So Christian Pulisic is back. That's worth being excited about. Just as we hadn't mentioned who we're playing. So this is October 11th versus Colombia in Tampa, and October 16th versus Peru in Connecticut. That's who we're playing. We'll get maybe more into the details of that when we get closer to the games and do our previews.
Yep.
Okay, who else jumped out at you when you saw the roster?
Who jumped out at you?
Michael Bradley.
All right.
I think it's almost like a moment we've been waiting for. Some people will have been hoping that it never happened.
Yeah.
I was assuming it would happen, and I'm perfectly okay with it.
All right.
Because if you are selecting your 23 or 24 best players, Michael Bradley is one of your 23 or 24 best players.
Okay,
right?
I think I agree with you. The only thing I'm still struggling with is how does he fit in? But I think it's the same question I would ask of Will Trapp: is do we want them as a lone number 6?
Is Will Trapp there as a spare?
I think they're kind of doing the same role. So
they just shave his head and send him out there.
Yeah, perfect.
Would you mind if I get on my soapbox about Bradley just for a second?
Sure.
I've seen a lot of the reaction about I never wanted him in the shirt again. If you really believe that he didn't try hard enough down in Trinidad or anything like that, you are not watching properly. Fair?
I don't know.
I've seen all those responses about how he's to blame for the failure of World Cup qualification. I don't think he's any more to blame than any of the other players that were down there. So to exclude him when he's still got a lot to offer as one of our best players, I think is completely unfair. And I also think if you think he didn't play well in some of those World Cup qualifying games, I think he deserves the chance to see if he fits in alongside Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie, and this next generation. We could, because if you were to jettison Michael Bradley, you might be missing out on this wonderful melding of the young and the old. shoulder.
All right, well, speaking of that, I would say that you kind of have that. I know we talked about it briefly, but just to go back to it for a second, you have that in the goalkeepers as well. I would say we thought maybe Zach Steffen was in there for the number 1 spot. Maybe Brad Guzan still has a case, and so you've got those two in there. They're going to be competing.
I literally said to Tim Howard, it seems like Zach Steffen is the number 1, and he got a little bit mad at me.
Yep.
That there's a big, bold fellow in Atlanta who might have something to say about that.
With about 60 caps to his name. Yeah, so I think it'll be interesting to see. Maybe they each get a game. Maybe Ethan Horvath gets some minutes, but who starts and who looks stronger and more commanding? Because Zach Steffen really will. I think it will force him to raise his game a little bit because Brad Guzan has that veteran experience.
So, there's going to be a bit more of a push in camp, right? Because before, I feel like Steffen could walk in and be like,
exactly,
it's me. Put the gloves on me. Put the number 1 on me. Let's go.
And that's really what this roster is about for me. That's what we want to see is when you do have your strongest roster, it forces everybody to work that much harder because you don't have, I'm the only left winger here, or I'm the logical starter, or I'm the logical starting goalkeeper or center back. It makes you have to work that much harder in camp to cement that spot.
Is this a battle for the soul of the past or the future? Is whether it's Guzan or Steffen? Like, everything comes down to this.
I mean, maybe in this camp, but also it's worth noting that it's still Dave Sarachan in charge. I think maybe once we have a new manager, that's when it gets cemented.
All right. We could probably guess as well maybe 1 game each for Guzan and Steffen. That would be my inkling right now.
I would agree.
Yeah. Okay, before we move on to all the other very interesting inclusions on this roster, today's show is sponsored by Greats, Brooklyn's first sneaker company.
That is true. Usually one of us is wearing our Greats when we record. Are you? Attaboy.
Not my new ones. These are my older ones. They get better with age.
They sure do.
Yeah.
They sure do. I'm usually wearing
More
mine,
character.
but I was coaching today and wearing either high tops or all white shoes in a grass field. Not the best idea. So I went soccer shoes, but I was sad not to have them because I do love my Greats.
Can also get credit for the limberness. I managed to get my leg above the table.
I think you did have to pull your leg up by hand.
I mean, I did not. Did I? I did, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So no credit. No credit.
But you credited yourself, and I think that's just as important.
It is. Self-esteem is important. So Greats is marketed as Brooklyn's first sneaker company. That is incredible to me that no one started a high-end sneaker company in Brooklyn before.
I mean, maybe in like the 1820s, but I feel like maybe like continuing to exist.
They ran them out of town.
Yeah,
they
probably.
ran them out of town. So we obviously love our Greats, but in truth, because we got nice samples that they sent us for free, so we can like walk around in nice shoes and feel like really cool. But don't just take our word for it that Greats are worth wearing. There are also lots of very high-end magazines that are quite happy to endorse Greats as well. So there's a story in Vogue, story in GQ, story in Esquire. What would you like to hear the quote from, Tyler? Let me know.
Let's go GQ. Why not?
Okay, GQ says, "You can't go wrong with a classic silhouette like this."
Oh,
it's as if they're talking about me.
Sure. What about Vogue? What did Vogue have to say?
Vogue says, "It's just the thing to put a spring in your step."
All right.
Yeah. Maybe that could be good for goalkeepers.
Yeah.
We'll get some to Horvath. Maybe we'll get things kickstarted.
Perfect. Work on that vertical just a little bit.
Help him out with that hill start.
Perfect.
Yeah. If our listeners would maybe like to up their sneaker game with some Greats. Are you looking down at my shoes? Oh, no, you were checking something. You're getting your pen. All right. Still, I'm going to pretend you're looking at my shoes. This is all about Daryl's self-esteem today. You can go to greats.com. You can shop the entire collection at greats.com. And you can get 15% off your order with the discount code TSS. 15% off your order at greats.com with the discount code TSS. Thank you to Greats for sponsoring today's episode.
And to all those publications for writing nice things about Greats.
Yeah.
Although I would imagine Greats earned that one.
I'm sure they did.
Were there more names there? We've talked about a few. Were there more names that stood out to you on this roster?
I mean, I think for most people, the name when they look at the roster is going to be Ben Sweat.
Yep.
New York City FC left back. It was certainly a surprise to me. This hadn't been rumoured. We hadn't heard about this. We thought, we mentioned Eric Lehigh earlier.
Yep.
Thought maybe Jorge Villafana could be the backup left back. Anthony Robinson appears to be the starting left back, right? So Ben Sweat's name was a big surprise to me.
Yeah.
We've seen him a couple of times before. I know of him. I know NYCFC fans have talked about him as, someone they really like and enjoy seeing him play for NYCFC. But we went and watched some next-level footage of Ben Sweat, right? We've watched every Ben Sweat touch for the last 2 or 3 games.
Yes, we have.
My feeling is not really an international quality left back.
I would agree.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Like a dependable MLS left back, but there's a lot in his game that I'm not quite sure he's ready for the international level. I'll be happy to eat those words if he gets like 3 assists across the next 2 friendlies.
I mean, maybe, but again, I would rather him see him do a bunch of 1v1 defending where he ends up with the ball without going to ground. Because that was the thing is like, yeah, if he provides assists, that's great. But the reality is, say against Colombia, I can't imagine we're going to be doing a ton of our fullbacks are going to be super far forward and helping in possession.
Juan Cuadrado?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be more about what our fullbacks can do when they're tasked with like having defenders dribbling at them at pace. Mm-hmm. And that was the thing that concerned me is Ben Sweat's. It seems like the way he chooses to approach that is to try to show the attacker outside, to show them away from goal. But the way he shapes up, he is doing that. It's just he's doing it maybe a yard too far to one side. So he basically leaves the center open, and it almost feels like it's designed. Right? Yeah, it feels like it's designed for him then to like cycle back and go to ground to make a slide tackle. So it's like either you go outside or I'm going to turn around and slide tackle you. But that's not great. Like again, Paolo Maldini, the idea of you don't want to slide tackle. It's a last ditch effort.
Yeah. It's about positioning and anticipation and not having to go to ground.
Yeah, and so I found that really disconcerting. That it felt like he really struggled in those 1v1 situations.
Is there a chance it just looks weird because he's a 6'2" left back?
I mean, maybe, but that's not my fault. Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, it's possible, but it was still the case that it felt like he had to go to ground more often than not. And it did feel like in the 1v1, like, specific videos we watched, he didn't do the best job of shepherding a player out of bounds or shepherding them into a position where they had to play it back.
Yep.
It felt like it ended up being a lot of high drama defending.
What about going forward? My take is that he seems capable of hitting decent crosses, but not in a way that has me super excited.
It seemed like he was pretty good with the, I guess we'll call them like the Pulisic cross of putting it low and kind of driven usually towards the near post or maybe the middle of the goal.
He had a recent assist like that, yeah.
I didn't see a lot from him that makes me think that he's great at the kind of swinging in balls to the back post and causing problems for goalkeepers coming off their line. It felt like it's much more of he combines, he's open in the channel, he gets the ball, he drives it across.
Yep.
And can pick out a spot, obviously. He assisted recently, as you said.
We're not saying he can't cross, right? We're just saying we're not looking at the left-footed David Beckham here.
No, we're not.
I'd say in his favour, the fact that he is a big dude, right, 6'2", he does win a lot of 50-50s that I saw just through fear, through sheer physical presence. Here's the interesting thing, though. Ben Sweat's contract with NYCFC, as far as I can tell, is up at the end of the year. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe his agents have managed to just persuade US Soccer maybe give this guy a call if we can help him get a better contract next year. Yeah?
I mean, that's possible. When you did some digging, it was Wasserman, right?
Yeah, Wasserman, which is a very powerful Wasserman Media Group, very powerful agent group in the United States. Represent a lot of MLS players and some overseas players. Travis Clark and I talked about this on Top Draw Soccer Show the other day. They are one of the most influential American soccer agents. I think it's possible that they could talk to US Soccer and be like, hey, he's going to negotiate a new contract if he was involved with the US national teams. Plus, he's actually decent. He's not terrible. Give him a go. Am I being really harsh there?
No. I mean, we've heard talk about things like that in the past where maybe contract situation plays into that national team call-up. And it does feel like if you have a new manager, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but theoretically, possibly, potentially, maybe we'll have one for the next round of international friendlies in November. It's unlikely that a new manager is going to be like, sure, I'll call in some random people. Like, they're going to want to stamp their name on this team. So maybe this is the time for, if you're trying to get somebody a cap to kind of increase their visibility, now would be the time to do it.
I hope my cynicism here is incorrectly placed.
I'm sure NYCFC fans will say it is.
I hope Ben Sweat gets those 3 sweaty assists over the games against Colombia and Peru.
And I would still rather see him go 3 for 3 in defensive duels.
Okay, maybe both?
Yeah.
Maybe we can get
or 1v1 defending, rather, yeah. And to be honest, though, like, I don't want to make it sound like it's just Ben Sweat, because we had similar concerns about Reggie Cannon from, again, we did the same thing for the last, 5 games. I think we watched his defensive efforts, and this is where I said in the very beginning, this feels to me like more of an emphasis on attacking fullbacks rather than we want people who are going to stay home and defend. Because Reggie Cannon, we saw look very good, very pacey, very capable of playing in crosses or combining or contributing to possession.
I'd say he times his overlaps well. Yeah. As well. Like I like his timing on when to get forward and get involved.
But we saw a lot of him doing a sort of sort of trying to poke tackle, but also not trying to foul. And so it ended up with him either going to ground or falling over a lot, or just sort of getting bypassed pretty readily. Now, maybe it was just a few off games. That's a distinct possibility.
One of the games we saw was against Alphonso Davies, and I'm
true.
not sure anyone came out of that looking good except for Alphonso Davies.
No, but I think in that situation, like it did feel, after he got beat by Alphonso Davies the first time, it felt like the next 2 or 3 was him being very aware of, oh, he could beat me, or I might get a card, so I kind of am going to try to hedge it.
Yeah.
And in those moments, like I think you just got to kind of put a body to the person. And if you get a card, you get a card. But better that than you sort of step to the player, get beaten because you were 60% into the challenge, but now you're out of position and everybody has to scramble.
I will say the footage we watched together is the worst I've seen Reggie Cannon look defensively.
Yeah, I think that's what was troubling.
In the past, I have seen him look a bit more solid, so he might just be on a little shaky streak. I would say he went to ground more than Ben Sweat. In the footage we watched recently.
Yeah, I think he absolutely did.
A little bit worried.
Yeah, I mean, and he's a player that we both wanted to see in the January camp, and we felt like had earned his spot on the roster. It was just trying to get more familiar with him and watching the scouting videos that we were. Yeah. It made me a little bit more nervous about the state, because we had that question about, like, now that we have the fast fullbacks, and I think the implication being we have more fullbacks than ever, are we in a position where we can play that back 5 or 3-5-2 or whatever?
Yeah.
And it does feel like one of those things where we have a lot of names. We have a lot of people who could potentially play that, but I still would like to see them do so on a more regular basis for club and country until I feel like, okay, we're good there. We have a lot of depth and we're stable.
Reggie Cannon's selection may also be with one eye on Olympic qualifying, because I think he's like 20 or 21 years old, so he's very likely going to be the U23 right back. Ben Sweat is older, right? So he's not a possibility for the Olympics, I don't think. So this may be just getting Cannon a little career progression ready for the Olympics.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So maybe Cannon and Sweat both selected for different career progression reasons.
Yeah. So Cannon and Sweat both with 0 caps to their name. That's the case for Aaron Long, who was called up once again. He didn't get any playing time last time.
Yeah.
The fourth player.
This is his second roster, right?
Yeah.
He actually looked good against Atlanta. I'm feeling pretty good about Aaron Long.
All right.
Yeah.
So Aaron Long in there, maybe he gets a cap.
Do you remember Aaron Long against DC United?
No.
Taking that weird angle after Acosta dribbled down the wing, and Long was like the last person who could block him, but then Long sees Wayne Rooney and goes over to cut off the pass to Wayne Rooney. So we've seen a couple of mistakes from Aaron Long, but also some good stuff as well.
Yeah. All right. So maybe he gets a minute. And then the final one with no caps that's included in this roster is Jonathan Amon. And that's the one that we've thought maybe there was an outside chance that he makes the roster last time.
Yes.
Where I think I'm still excited to see him. Although I have to say, it was not a good scouting viewing. Of all the players that we watched in depth, there was definitely some concerns as to consistency, put it that way.
So Eamon was another player that I discussed with Travis Clark on the Top Drawer Soccer show, and I watched a lot of footage of him. And, okay, so is it the 4-1-1 on Jonathan Eamon? The information is left winger. Plays in Denmark for...
I'm not going to lie, it being a soccer show, I was like, that's a new formation.
Stick another 4 in there, you've got Saraken's favourite.
Yeah.
Right? Left winger, plays for FC Nordsjælland in the Danish Superliga. Very right-footed. Loves to dribble at players, but doesn't necessarily have a lot of tricks. Right? What he'll do is dribble at you with his right foot coming in from the left, and he'll just look to essentially pick a side and accelerate past you. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
And is often successful, but certainly not like 100% success rate in doing that. He's also, I think, very good at making a 1-2 happen. Like he'll find an open player in the box, like send that pass and then move on so he can be on the end of it. I also think he's quite good at finding space, but he's another one I'm not fully convinced, even though I'm excited to see him, I'm not fully convinced he's ready for international soccer.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll add this. Like, I'm really happy we went back and watched all the footage of him we did, because he does feel like one of those players that we've heard so much about. We've been following via the scouting network and other avenues for like a good few months now, if not longer.
Yeah.
And so I think he's one who could have come in, and maybe if I hadn't watched that footage, I would have been like, get him in there. He's doing awesome. He's tearing up the Danish league. Like, let's see what he does.
His highlights are goals, right? Yeah.
And then when he dribbles
goals
at somebody,
and assists every time.
And then when he dribbles at somebody and gets stuck, it sort of is like, ooh, that's not good. And then when he dribbles at somebody and gets dispossessed, it's like, ooh, that's not good. And it felt like it could be another one of those, oh, here's this player we're all hyped about. He comes in, he doesn't score 6 goals right away. And so it sort of is like, ooh, maybe he's not quite there yet. And so I feel like it's lowered my expectations a little bit of he seems very good on the ball. He seems very confident. But I would like to see what he does in a U.S. jersey when faced with stronger opposition, stronger defenders, physically and like technique-wise,
Yep.
but just also in terms of a different system where he's going to be under pressure far more readily, I guess, or
he
faster.
I think partly he's good at finding the space, but he seemed to have a lot of space to run at people in the Danish Superliga in a way that Colombia or Peru or really any decent international team is not going to give you space to run at your fullbacks.
And you could flip that around and say that, like, I did seem like the couple times he got the ball when he didn't have time to really think, that's when we saw him look really impressive. That was when it was cut inside and shoot, or cut outside and play that ball back across.
You said maybe too much space is a bad thing.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's right.
The more time you have to think, the more time you're overthinking, basically.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if maybe put under pressure facing a stronger Colombia team, if he is going to have to work that much faster and that much quicker. Or maybe we even see him revert to simple touches, 1 and 2 touch. He grows into the game. He finds his confidence. Then he takes somebody on and beats them. Then it works out. If we see him trying to go at somebody in the first 30 seconds and he gets just blocked off the ball, then I'm going to be a little bit worried.
But Yerry Mina just steps into him and it's all over. So I think it feels a little bit like we're being more negative than usual about a young US roster. I would argue we're being very realistic about Jonathan Amon, which is you can't expect him to just step out there, blaze past 3 people and score like he has been doing in all those highlight videos you see. But he's still capable of doing that, right? So you can set a foundation of realistic expectations and just hope that maybe he'll produce one of those moments for the US.
Yeah, that's fair. I think you're right, because I feel that too, that I'm not quite as like enthusiastic.
Like, Amon's going to burn Colombia. Go for it.
And it feels a little bit like if you were in the process of buying a house and you were like getting all the stuff that you were going to put into your, like if you've been living in like an 800 square foot apartment and suddenly you're buying a 3,000 square foot house and you're like accumulating things that you want to put into it, but you can't put into it until you move into it. That's a little bit how I feel about this roster. It's sort of like, yeah, it's great. We've got all these names and I'm excited and it seems like it's a strong team. Still not the permanent manager. Still don't necessarily know if any of these guys are going to be in there or how many of them will be in there. And so it still feels like this. I can get enthusiastic, but now it is starting to sink back to reality of like, yeah, we still don't have a coach and we're still not quite sure what the plan is. It would be nice if we knew that before we were really getting pumped up about what these kids are going to do and where they're going to play.
Okay. This is an interesting roster reaction show. I think the more I think about it, the more it's an interesting roster. Few more players to talk about. But first, today's show is also sponsored by The Athletic. The Athletic are back as October sponsors.
They sure are.
Do you know why The Athletic keep sponsoring? Because people keep signing up. Total Soccer Show listeners are signing up to read The Athletic, hopefully via the app, because that's the best way to do it, to get the 40% off deal and enjoy all the content The Athletic has to offer.
And if you, like me, are maybe slightly concerned about the state of the hiring process, Paul Tenorio has you covered. He's got a good article talking about how basically the goal is to have a coach selected by November 1st.
The headline is US Soccer aiming to select new US men's national team coach by November 1st.
Yes. Yeah. Doesn't necessarily mean that coach is going to take over right away. There's some possibility that it could be those mid-November friendlies, or more likely is maybe that January camp is when the new manager comes in. But either way, it's just nice to be reminded, like, yeah, at least the ball is rolling. We're moving in a direction.
I think so. I don't know. The Paul Tenorio story is an interview with Ryan Mooney and Nico Romain, who are working basically under Ernie Stewart in the coaching search. And it feels like things are moving forward, but there's a lot of very vague principles in there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like we want to be a good cultural fit. We're going to have a certain
identifying a profile. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of good buzzwords, but no like concrete. Here's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And what worries me as well is if you're going to decide on someone by November 1st, it's going to take 2 months to get them in the job.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one possibility, or it's also maybe you're worried about MLS playoffs, and then you want to give them a little bit of time off. Is maybe the other
because maybe the coach is going to be an MLS coach.
Or maybe it's Jose Mourinho and he'll be sacked by January.
Lots of other good stories on The Athletic. One I haven't read, but has literally just popped up at the top of my app. European football's mascot war is upon us by Brooks Peck.
Oh, boy.
So I haven't read that.
Brooks is back.
I'm going to read that later.
That sounds good to me.
Brooks is back.
I enjoyed the one I think you mentioned on the Tim Howard show, the Nando Vila article about Florentino Perez and basically how he's consolidating power at Real Madrid.
Yep.
I know you talked about this one already, but I read it and was sort of like...
I did think of you when I read it.
Why is that?
Just this is a story that Taylor would like.
Why do you say that? Not that I disagree.
Because I think you like the inner workings of football clubs.
I think
knowing what's going on behind the scenes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also you kind of like the conspiracies of when things aren't
Mm-hmm.
quite as they appear on the surface.
Yeah.
Because it's still theoretically a democracy.
Yeah, exactly. And like I won't go too much into detail in case people want to read it for themselves, but I will say it was interesting to hear sort of you got both sides in the sense of you heard Florentino Perez talk about why we needed to pursue this avenue or why we needed to have voting work this way.
Yeah.
And you can see the justification, but then you immediately see the counterpoint of like, or are you just trying to consolidate power as opposed to keeping out foreign owners, which is what you're claiming. And so to see both sides, it's very interesting to see how easily you can sort of like colored things in a certain way as to be like, I'm doing it for your benefit. I need to own the club so that no one else can own it, and then I'll be benevolent. It's going to totally work.
So if that one gets you down, I'd recommend going and reading the mascot story.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good.
You can read all of these at a 40% discount for an annual subscription. If you go to the new URL to subscribe via Total Soccer Show, it is theathletic.com/TSS October. We can't make a jingle out of this one.
We can't.
Theathletic.com/TS. Did you try? /TSS October.
I've been trying since we started this read to think about it. But yeah, none of them really work. Because either way you have to like adjust spelling and
We'll
stuff.
tell you what we'll do instead. We'll just put the link in the show notes.
That makes sense.
The link will be in the show notes.
Let's do that. And let's talk about let's go back to the roster, but let's talk about happy things.
Happy
shall
things?
we?
All right.
For example, I'm guessing it made you happy to see some of the center backs who were in there.
Yeah, so what? John Brooks, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Aaron Long, Matt Miazga.
Yep.
Put Miazga next to Brooks.
Yep.
Job's done.
There we go. That's good enough for me.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Give Aaron Long a debut at some point. Give
Yeah.
CCV a little more experience along the way. Everything's golden.
Yeah, and this is even one where, even though I know we're theoretically trying to build the roster and like see who can do what and where, this is one where I wouldn't mind seeing John Brooks and Matt Miazga play the majority of both games.
Yeah.
Because just continue to get that partnership stronger and stronger. And again, you force the other players.
Make them sit next to each other at dinner. Make them room together.
Perfect.
We're going to make this partnership happen.
Yeah, they have their own like weird twin language. I like that too. Yeah, but I mean, I like that idea because then it establishes them as your like number one starting pair. But I think with that, I know that might go against what I've said in the past about how like you don't want just two guaranteed starters, and that's not what I'm saying. It's more so you've established these are the two. This is the standard. If you want to be a starter, you got to beat them. So you got to raise your game in training. You got to really compete. And that way, if we do see suddenly CCV starting instead of Matt Miazga or John Brooks, then we know, oh wow, this person has done really, really well, as opposed to, oh, this guy hasn't gotten a couple minutes yet.
I'll be honest. I think that's more of a next coach situation, right? But we can put the beginnings of that by just identifying Brooks and Miazga really are the two best defenders going.
Sure.
Right? Yeah.
All right.
Not in the whole world, but with US passports.
Yeah. All right. That works for me. So we and then the person who maybe is dribbling at them or will be dribbling at them in camp, amongst others, is Josh Sargent. That's another one who we thought maybe would be in there, but I'm happy that he is.
Yeah, same here. So the strikers are Andrei Novakovic, Josh Sargent, and Bobby Wood. So Sargent is back. I guess he wasn't called into the September friendlies just to spend more time with Bremen, right? I think that was it. I quite like this front three just in terms of I'd be happy with any of them starting, right? Even Bobby Wood. I know that it's not fashionable to like Bobby Wood right now, but I'm happy with all three of these strikers.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, I guess I'm with you. I won't be like too upset one way or the other. I would like to see maybe Novakovic get more minutes than he did, which was 0 last time. And then Josh Sargent, I mean, just because it's been a while since we saw him, I think last I really saw him play was against I already mentioned them. Yeah, Bolivia. Thank you. I couldn't remember the name. And looked very good. But again, we want to see him against stronger opposition because it does feel the quotes we've heard most recently is that he's not that far away from Werder Bremen's starting 11.
Yeah.
So to see what he can do for the national team with a couple more months of experience under his belt, I would happily see that.
Could we say, I can't remember if we've already said this or not, but can we say Josh Sargent and Tim Weah are sort of the surprise teenage survivors of the days when we were just calling up all youngsters like the Bolivia game? They are now alongside them, like Sargent with Wood and Bradley and Gazan and all those older players. Weah and Sargent still make the cut. That is interesting to me.
And Dave Sarakin was asked about that because it was basically two young players who aren't starting for their clubs, but you've still included them. And he said,
this in the USsoccer.com softball Q&A?
It sure was. The zero follow-up softball Q&A. And he basically said, they're the links to the future. They're the ones that we expect great things from. So we've kind of established them on the road to regular starting status, and we want to continue that with this team.
I am weirdly more excited about seeing Tim Weah again after what he did against Mexico. When we saw him in that 4-2-3-1 shape, and you could just see the brightness of him in terms of he always wanted to pass and move and make something happen and dribble at people, draw people in, then release the ball. Then it just seemed like something was going to happen every time Tim Weah was in charge of an attack. So I'm suddenly excited Well, it's weird. I think of him as a more senior player than I did 2 or 3 months ago.
I mean, yeah. I mean, he is.
Yeah.
But I think it's also...
That's the point of him playing, I guess.
Yeah. And, like, forgive me for, like, sounding like I'm moving on too fast, but, like, I remember when Weston McKennie was first called in, like, that Portugal friendly, and just seeing the enthusiasm in the camp and how up for it he was. Mm-hmm. And not to say that he wasn't, but he had the injury. But it feels like Timothy Weah has kind of carried that on. And to see him really... how willing he was to go at Mexico and try stuff and wanted the ball and wanted to beat Mexico. Mm-hmm. That spoke volumes to me, and I'm with you. I'm very excited to see him. I don't know if he'll start, though, because, as you mentioned previously, there's lots of competition on the wings.
The other guy included hasn't been back for a while through injury mostly. Kenny Saif. Yep. Kenny Saif is back. I was quite excited when he was called into that Gold Cup roster. He got injured, I think, in the warm-up game or in the first Gold Cup game. I can't remember. I don't think he's been back since.
No, he is not.
So this is a thing that we've missed out on maybe for a year or so. This could have been a left winger that we'd been enjoying for a year. Instead, it's like he's having to redo his debut. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think with that in mind, I'm very excited to see him because I do think he's one. Yeah, I think he's one who would have contributed to World Cup qualifying if he hadn't had that injury. And then basically just the timing hasn't worked because he's had other injuries and getting back into form. And it seems like this is kind of the reward for that hard work is getting him in there. And I think there's a decent chance we see him start.
I think so too. I think maybe he starts at left wing or whatever formation we end up in. I think there's a good chance he starts at left wing.
Yep.
For those not familiar with Kenny Saif, he is with Anderlecht in Belgium. So he's playing at a more than decent level, right? It's like a second-tier European league level, right? Not that was stupid phrasing. It's the top division in Belgium.
Yeah.
Belgium's like on the second rung of European leagues.
Sure.
Fair. He looks really good whenever we see him for Anderlecht. He looks like he has great technique, a lot of surprise, weird, skillful turns.
Yep.
He looks like he can dribble at someone and do that thing where you're not sure which way he's going to go. And crucially, he can cross a ball.
Yep.
Kenny Saif can bend and swing a cross in with the best of them, maybe not the very best, but you know what I'm saying. It's crossing that could be dangerous for the United States.
Yeah. And takes set pieces as well. So maybe he's taking some corners, maybe he's taking some free kicks. But yeah, I think he will be a valuable contributor, especially because I expect lots of attacks going down the wings.
I also like his hustle. I feel like he will hustle back and try and win the ball back. I think there's a lot to come from Kenny Saif.
And then if we want to go way, way back, I think I'm correct in saying that Kenny Saif is Druze.
Yes.
Has 2 caps for Israel, I think, at friendly level, obviously. But
he one-time switched already.
But followed the one-time switch to play for the United States.
So we got him.
And it felt like it was going to be this, like, he plays for the Gold Cup, that goes well, he gets some more minutes, and then, as we mentioned, the injury. Yeah, and then the World Cup, that didn't really happen so much. Yeah. So it does feel like this is kind of a chance to start over and see what happens.
Yeah, so that's exciting for me. So we mentioned this at the top of the show, lots of attacking width. Ayman, Saif, Pulisic, maybe even Tim Weah. There are lots of options to attack down
Maybe
the
even
wings.
Kellyn Acosta, potentially.
Maybe even Kellyn Acosta, yeah. Is it worth talking about the glut of midfielders on this roster?
Sure.
So we talked a lot about Bradley. There's Bradley, Will Trapp, Weston McKennie, who came back from injury this past weekend, Tyler Adams, Kellyn Acosta. That's 5 central midfielders.
And maybe Julian Green, depending on where you want to put him, either as a winger or as like the number 10 where he kind of was against Mexico.
Yeah, he's the only one that makes sense as a number 10, right? Even though to me he doesn't entirely make sense as a number 10.
Yeah, yeah. Well said.
If we did that again, I could also see Kellyn Acosta in that role, maybe. You could see Christian Pulisic in that role, maybe.
Yeah.
Also, maybe we should think about starting 11 when we get to previewing
that
the
works
games.
for me.
Yeah,
that works for me.
To not get too deep into it. But just to say, a lot of central midfielders here.
Yes, indeed.
One thing I'll be looking for is the attitude in camp, because you talked earlier about how Weston McKennie was like the fun leader of the group, and everything was like quite relaxed and enjoyable when it was all the youngsters. I'm interested to see if Bradley and Guzan can step back into this. And what I'm hoping to see is everybody doesn't all like go quiet and be too deferential to the veterans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, especially given some of the coverage that we've seen of Michael Bradley lately and some of the opinions that have been espoused about him.
Yeah.
If he does come in and suddenly it is like Bradley running everything and this is how it's going to be, maybe that backs up some of those stories and maybe that's not the best for the vibe. So I am very curious to see how camp looks to an outsider. I'm sure you won't get a lot of insider interviews about what's going on inside the locker room, but just to see, are they playing around, are they goofing around, are they playing silly games before and after training the way they were in some of the other friendlies.
I want to see Weston McKennie like squirting his water bottle in Michael Bradley's ears.
I cannot imagine that happening.
But it kind of should.
It probably should. Why not?
I feel like we've talked a lot. Is there anyone we haven't talked about that you want to talk about?
No, I think we've pretty much talked about everybody. I mean, I guess we really only grazed over Anthony Robinson, but I think that's indicative of where he is with this U.S. team. That we expect him to be there, and we like that he's there.
We just assume he's the left back.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Okay, so again, those games are October 11th. That's a Thursday against Colombia in Tampa, and October 16th. That's a Tuesday against Peru in Connecticut.
And then, as we've said a couple times, when we get closer, we'll do a little bit more looking at Colombia and Peru themselves, but also what we expect the United States to do, or more likely what we would like to see the United States do against both of those teams.
Oh, speaking of the United States, the US women's national team starts World Cup qualifying in the next few days. We will have a show in the next couple of days taking a look at the roster and taking a look at the opposition, which includes Mexico.
We'll hear more about one Mexican player in just a moment, because I believe now, Mr. Grove, it's time to get to some scouting. Does that work for you?
It does. It's buried in my notes here somewhere, so I'll invite you to go first.
All right, that works for me. Up first, we have a report from Ira Jersey. Shall I slow it down?
No, I found it.
He's scouting Ashley Sanchez. Okay, you got it. 19-year-old American attacker for UCLA. Again, Ashley Sanchez. Ashley has been a regular starter in her sophomore year for the UCLA Bruins, but her production has slipped. Case in point, she found great positions to score against Pac-12 rival Washington State with a match-high 5 shots, 3 of which were on target, but was not clinical enough to finish. She lacked power and accuracy. UCLA is out of the top 10 rankings, coinciding with Ashley's dip in form.
It's a rough year for Ashley Sanchez because the U20 World Cup did not go well, and now this. Zebu A is scouting Lucero Cuevas, the 22-year-old Mexican striker for Club America.
This is a wild story.
Okay, Zebu A says, reports are that Club America coaches judged Cuevas and several other players to be overweight/out of shape when they showed up for pre-season. These players did separate fitness training away from their teammates until the 4th match of the season. The club lied to journalists, saying that the players were injured, and instructed the players to lie as well, which Cuevas did on her social media. Since rejoining the full team, Lucero has just 1 goal in 7 games.
Yeah. So you could you could say that maybe they were deceiving journalists and not telling the truth, or you could maybe make the argument that they didn't want to come out and say, yeah, these players are all out of shape. So they instead wanted to say, like, oh yeah, they're working on injuries and stuff like that. I could see why you would do that as a club, but it's not great when the story comes out.
Yeah.
All right. But we can move on to, happier topics. Ian Shank, scouting Fernando Arce Jr., 21-year-old American midfielder on loan at Dorados de Sinaloa from Club Tijuana.
I know who their coach is.
Fernando Arce got Dorados' only goal in a 2-1 loss to Querétaro that knocked them out of Copa MX. The goal was a case of right place, right time. Arce pounced on a loose ball, pinging around the Querétaro box, and slotted it home at the far post from just inside the 18. Arce must be in good with Maradona, their current coach, as he went the full 90 for the 3rd straight game.
Is Querétaro one of the things we had to pronounce when we did the Spanish pronunciation on tour? Yeah.
And our friend Pedro lied to me about how to pronounce it properly. Yes, because I pronounced it exactly how he taught me, and Alexis laughed in my face.
But our friend Pedro is from Spain.
Yeah, that was my
from
mistake.
Mexico, right? So maybe that was the difference.
But he said he knew the club. He's like, oh yeah, of course, Querétaro. And then when I said it that way.
We played soccer with Pedro, who's a very confident man.
That's true. Yeah, he did try to fight our friend Pav, didn't he?
There you go. Yeah,
who had maybe 100 pounds on him.
Yep. David Majewski is scouting Shaq Moore, the 21-year-old American right back on loan at Royce from Levante. David says Shaq started his first game for Royce this past weekend, playing all 90 at right back in a 1-1 draw against Gymnastique. He had an excellent goal-scoring chance in the 8th minute when he made a run into the box, met a long cross directly in front of goal, missed badly with an accurate header. Sorry, that's not his game. Then in the 20th minute, a Gymnastique corner kick to the penalty spot was headed to the far post, where Moore was overpowered by Raul Albentosa, resulting in the opening goal of the match. Shaq Moore said he needs to improve, and hopefully he will now that he's getting regular minutes.
Hopefully indeed.
The problem was admin stuff, right?
Yes.
Wasn't there a weird registration thing, and that's why he couldn't play?
Yeah.
Maybe the lack of match fitness is what caught up with him in terms of the national team call-up.
That's a distinct possibility, or they wanted to give him time to gel now that he's eligible to play. Especially because I'm going to assume that Royce won't be taking the international break off. Don't second division teams continue to play?
Unless you've got loads of people called up. So they're probably fine.
Yeah, I would say so. David Nowitzki?
I'll go Nowaczewski.
Nowaczewski. There we go, Nowaczewski. Scouting Sebastian Szymański, 19-year-old Polish midfielder for Legia Warsaw. If you're wondering why I didn't struggle with that one, it's because David was kind enough to write out the pronunciation for us. Szymański continues to perform well for both club and country. He continues to start most matches for Legia and had a nice assist in their 1-0 victory over rival Lech Poznań. His performances, again, that was spelled out phonetically. His performances have helped Liga shake off a rough patch, and he was called up and played in both of Poland U21's recent games against the Faroe Islands, which was a 1-1 draw, and against Finland, which was the 3-1 win for Poland.
Victor Savage is scouting Ricardo Kišna, the 23-year-old Dutch left winger on loan at ADO Den Haag from Lazio. Victor says that Ricardo Kišna has returned to Den Haag for a second consecutive season. A ruptured cruciate ligament completely dashed his last campaign, and it's been over a year since he appeared in a match. It's like a do-over on a loan.
Yeah, I think that's basically what Victor said, yeah. And also, David, I'm going to try this one more time. David Nowaczewski. That's what I'm going to say is how you're supposed to pronounce that one. Now that I've had a moment to look at it again and not just panicked when seeing it on paper. Steve Renard scouting Yuri Tielemans, the 21-year-old Belgian midfielder from Monaco. Tielemans has started to appear more in highlight packages, but his rise in visibility has come with a dreadful run in form from Monaco. Tielemans made a nice pass to start the move that resulted in the only goal for Monaco versus Atletico Madrid in the Champions League, and he had several more that wound up going nowhere in a recent 1-1 draw with Nîmes and a 1-0 loss to Angers. I know that's not how you pronounce that, but whatever. Monaco now sit 18th in the Ligue 1 table with 6 points from 7 games.
British people pronounce it Angers.
There we go.
Dylan Viach is scouting Kai Havertz. Kai Havertz, the 19-year-old German midfielder for Bayer Leverkusen, as featured in the weekend review. Dylan says Kai has grabbed hold of the number 10 role, and it's clearly his most natural position. Leverkusen tacked on their third win in a row over Fortuna Düsseldorf midweek, winning 2-1, including a chipped cross assist from Kai for the second goal. All three of these wins have seen Kai in the number 10 role, with Lars Bender and Dominic Kor playing as defensive pair behind him. This was sent before the defeat to Dortmund, I assume.
It was indeed. In your face, Kai Havertz. Ryan Marzak scouting Pione Sisto, 23-year-old Danish midfielder for Celta Vigo. I paused there because Pione Sisto has been off to a slow start this season, and the manager may be trying to get him some rest with his last 2 appearances coming as a substitute. Even so, Pione Sisto is still getting shots on target and remains one of Celta's preferred free kick takers.
Ryan LaRose is scouting Rafael Camacho, the 18-year-old Portuguese winger for Liverpool. Ryan says Rafael Camacho, Rafa, has broken free from having to play defence. Last week he started in the left forward position against PSG for the U19s, against the UEFA Youth League. He put in 2 goals, including a back post header in their 5-2 rout. Reports are he pressed like Firmino and scored like Salah. Then today he helped the Liverpool U23s beat Chelsea. He got a goal and an assist. The assist was especially nice because he was able to burn past TSS favourite scoutee Ethan Ampadu and put the ball perfectly in front of Matty Virtue for an easy tap-in. Is that his real name?
That sounds like a made-up name.
Matty Virtue. Trent Alexander-Arnold can relax now that Camacho is impressing as a left winger instead of a right back. But Sadio Mane better watch out if Rafa keeps this up. I like that Ryan is doing promo for Rafael Camacho as well as scouting.
That's what you got to do. You got to be the hype man and the scout all at once.
So thank you to all our scouts for sending in reports. Taylor, thank you for taking the time to talk to me about the US men's national team roster.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you for listening. And that goes double if you listen to both our shows today. Taylor and I will be back, of course, later this week with yet more Total Soccer shows.